Everybody understands that if you sack somebody because they're pregnant or disabled, for example, that's discrimination and it's illegal. But if the Gillard government gets its way, discrimination will also include insulting or offending somebody on certain grounds. The government claims there's a scare campaign underway about the proposed changes, although critics, including media organisations and constitutional law experts, believe the plans could hinder freedom of speech. This week, a Senate committee is hearing submissions. It's already received 600 in writing. To debate the anti-discrimination proposal, I was joined earlier by the Cabinet Secretary, Mark Dreyfus, and the Shadow Attorney-General, George Brandis. George Brandis, Mark Dreyfus, welcome to the program.
Good to be here, Lee.
Hello, Lee.
Mark Dreyfus, why should it be illegal to insult or offend somebody?
It's not, as you've just suggested, illegal, and it's not going to be illegal to insult or offend someone. There's been a great deal of misinformation put out about this consolidation, because that's what it is, of 5 existing acts that together form the body of anti-discrimination law in Australia.
But Section 19 of that proposal clearly spells out that discrimination can include conduct that offends, insults or intimidates.
And what that is giving effect to a whole body of case law. We're not just legislating for the first time here in this area. This is law that's been built up, developed, well worked through by the Australian community over several decades. And those words that you've referred to are not intended to be standalone. They're intended to show that in some circumstances, particularly I think in workplaces, repeated verbal abuse, repeated giving of verbal offence where day after day, say a woman, because this is part of the legislation is to protect against discrimination against women, particularly in workplaces. You might have a woman who has a superior who says to her day after day after day, "You're useless, you're just a woman, what would you know?" Now that, in those circumstances, would be unlawful. It's unlawful now.
Okay,
and all that's intended here is to make clear what the law already is.
All right, let me bring in George Brandis there. Senator Brandis, how do you interpret what's on the table?
Well, Lee, it simply isn't the truth to say that this is merely a consolidation of 5 existing acts. This bill takes anti-discrimination law way further than the existing law in a way that is much more invasive of people's liberties of speech and conduct. And if you don't want to accept that from me, then that is exactly what Jim Spiegelman, the Labor Party's recently appointed chairman of the ABC, it's what even Professor Gillian Triggs, the recently appointed head of the Australian Human Rights Commission, and indeed, of all people, Senator Christine Milne, have themselves said. The fact is that it is more than a consolidation, to use Mark's words. It creates a new definition of what constitutes discrimination, which includes to offend or to insult. It identifies new categories of so-called protected attributes, which were never part of the law before, including political opinion and social origins. It extends the reach of this Act to areas of life which were never reached by the existing 5 laws, and on the most important issue in any of these cases, that is the question of purpose or intent, it creates a reverse onus of proof in all cases.
Well, Senator Brandis, I want to come back to that reverse onus of proof, but if I can just get you to elaborate on one point there. You talk about the so-called protected attributes. That section I referred to before about including insult and intimidation and so on makes it clear that it has to be in relation to some of those things like disability, pregnancy, political opinion. Why shouldn't Australia have a zero tolerance approach to somebody being insulted or offended because of their political beliefs?
Well, I think we should have a zero tolerance approach towards laws which tell us what we may say or what we may not say in political discussion. And the Coalition's position is it is simply not the role of government to be imposing some kind of moral or political or cultural censorship which says you can't offend somebody by expressing your opinions, and if you do, you can be taken to court for doing it.
Mark Dreyfus, one of the things that Senator Brandis raised was the onus of proof. Is it the case that somebody accused of discrimination will have to prove that they didn't discriminate? So if I accuse my boss of being a bully, my boss has to prove that they aren't a bully?
I'll come to that onus of proof in a moment, but I can't leave without comment what George Brandis has just said there, Lee, about the purpose of this legislation. We've made it entirely clear that it is intended to be a consolidation of these existing anti-discrimination laws, and Senator Brandis knows very well that it is just not true to say that this is an attempt to legislate what people can say in their own homes or legislate what people can say in pubs or in political discussions. It's very clearly an anti-discrimination law, and it's directed at workplaces, it's directed at provision of services. The law sets out what is intended here.
But Senator Brandis says it expands enormously what's already out there.
Well, I don't accept for a moment that it expands enormously the range or scope of the anti-discrimination legislation.
Senator Brandis, are you exaggerating?
I know that that's what
Mark,
Senator Brandis is saying.
The Attorney General's Department themselves, the Attorney General's Department...
Not at all, and I'd invite people not...
Department actually
if George
briefed,
would let me finish, Lee.
No, well, I'm not going to let you get away with falsehoods, Mark.
Well,
the Attorney General's
the falsehoods are coming from Senator Brandis here, Lee.
Let me address...
The Attorney General's Department briefed
Senator
the Senate
Brandis.
Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee
Let me put
on
that
this
to Mark
very
Dreyfus.
issue, and
Is it
they
the
themselves
case?
said it's an expansion.
Is what Senator Brandis says there about the Attorney General's Department accurate?
I think we need a bit of context here, Lee. This is a draft bill that comes on top of a long process of consultation that's already occurred. This is further consultation. The